I remember the moment where I didn't care if people liked it, what I did. Mm-hmm. I remember that moment exactly. I was in a little theater company in San Francisco. We were producing a play, and I was like, I just don't care. Like, the message is there, and people will come to it with their own energy and thoughts, and I'm not in charge of that. Mm-hmm. It's separate from me. And I've done this work, and now I'm out of the equation. And it was so freeing.
There has got to be more than this.
Welcome to the Morse Code Podcast, where we talk with entrepreneurially minded creatives in music, film, and writing. My name's Korby, and I'm hoping these conversations inspire you to push deeper into your own work, whether you're a full-time professional or just starting out on your own creative odyssey. Our next guest is a real mover shaker in the publishing world. Danielle Marshall is current editorial director of Lake Union Publishing, the general fiction imprint of Amazon Publishing. Lake Union publishes over 80 titles a year, generating more than $40 million in yearly revenue. Danielle and I met at WriterFest in Nashville a couple of years ago, which is when I learned she started out not in book publishing, but in my vocation. She was an aspiring singer-songwriter. In a life of twists and turns, she experienced one of those cathartic bookstore moments, and suddenly her path was changed forever. We talk about that moment and compare notes on the mystical experiences that change lives because, I've got a few myself. Also, it's not every day you get to visit with a person who's at the helm of a major publishing enterprise. So we talk about how publication actually works for authors whose titles are acquired by larger companies. We discuss expectation versus reality and how very few authors actually make a living writing books. We talk about specific examples where the publishing game changed, like in the case of 50 Shades of Grey, where Danielle speculates it was the privacy of the e-reader that contributed to its widespread success. Finally, we get into some vulnerable territory, discussing how shame, fear, and celebrity worship hold people back from creating in their own lives. We talk about how this podcast is my attempt, or one of them, to give people, and I include myself here, permission to create. Because at the end of the day, the only reason to make something is because you want to. If you get something out of the Morse Code Podcast, please like and subscribe. And if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, give us 5 stars, baby. And now here's my conversation with Danielle Marshall. Danielle Marshall.
Yes.
Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
I've been looking forward to this conversation ever since we talked about it, which is like 2.5, 3 months ago.
Right.
It's been a long time coming. And we discussed this offline as well, but just to kind of set the table, so to speak. Uh-huh. There's a lot of different ways this conversation could go, and I want to touch on as many of them that we have time for and that you feel comfortable getting into. Dealer's choice. Okay. Mm-hmm. One of those things, it might be the capacity in which we met, which was at WriterFest.
Yes.
A year before last, in your capacity as, I'm going to say editorial director at Lake Union Press, which is an imprint.
It's an imprint at Amazon Publishing.
Yes.
Not to be mistaken with Kindle Direct Publishing, which is self-publishing. We're like a little random house inside of Amazon.
Amazing. And that's what people talked in whispers when they mentioned your name at this writer conference. Danielle Marshall. and then you turned out to be you, and you were so nice and accessible and fun to talk to. And what's more, in that conversation, I learned that you had a creative musical past of your own.
Yes.
So I want to talk about that too, because you are unique among the guests here in that you've kind of worked on both sides of the creative table, you could say.
I've dabbled.
You've done a bit more than dabbling.
Yeah.
But maybe we could talk.
But I'm an analog. Let's just be clear. I come from the analog era.
I do too.
Okay.
So we have that in common as well. Those who grew up without phones.
Yeah. I love telling stories about the big, long, rubbery, springy cord that you had on the phone, and you would take it in the other room and shut the door.
The kids watching Stranger Things think it's so kitsch.
Exactly.
It was a way of life.
I'm retro now. It feels good.
You are. Well, let's talk about maybe your current iteration first, and then kind of go from there and see what happens. So one of the things I think that would be valuable to our audience is not necessarily the way it works now, but a way it works now as far as publishing goes in 2024. And I know that you guys are, probably like many publishers, looking for specific types of books or authors. Is that fair to say?
That's very fair to say. And I would also say publishing now is very egalitarian, but one thing, anyone can do it. And everybody thinks they can write a book. Actually, I've noticed in recent, like the past 10 years, like everybody's writing a book. But one of the ways that we talk about imprints that are inside a publishing company is that's a particular focus in a certain kind of content. So, for example, we have an imprint that publishes mysteries and thrillers. We have one that publishes science fiction and fantasy. We have one that publishes romance. My particular ilk at Lake Union is what we call general commercial fiction or book club fiction. And those are the books you see when you go in a bookstore on the front table. It's kind of books that Reese would pick. It's like book of the month club type of stuff. So it's genre adjacent in a lot of ways to different kinds of fiction, but it's like middle lane, everybody might like it.
Genre adjacent is a fun term, and that would mean a genre specific. Genre usually means like a mystery type
Correct.
book or a science
If you're a
fiction.
genre book, you have a lane that you're in, and there are certain expectations of what that content's going to be like. But we have a lot of fun because we're sort of a miasma of all different genres, so we can experiment and play with whatever we want to, as long as we think it has commercial potential.
Right. And so how do you get those titles? I mean, I think I know, but you could explain to us.
They come to me primarily through agents. I do get the occasional, singing, tap dancing telegram person who approaches me with their manuscript.
That would be what I would do.
I get some things via LinkedIn, even though my LinkedIn profile says I do not accept submissions via LinkedIn. I still get that. But mostly through literary agents and who understand editors in the field and what their specialty is and know who to pitch what to. So to clarify the commercial fiction that I'm talking about, I don't publish literary fiction, like really highbrow, sort of James Joycean kind of fiction. We publish popular fiction.
And that's probably a great clue for someone who was, writing or had written a book and was trying to find a publisher and wondering what to do. One great piece of advice would be probably not to reach out to the editor at a publishing company, but maybe find an agent first. And by finding an agent, you would probably reach out to the agent most likely to be interested in the kind of book that you're writing. Is that?
Yeah. I mean, I really get some very wild contacts. Somebody recently reached out to me with a book of essays about being an engineer. And I was like, this sounds fascinating. And I can tell you're a really very experienced engineer, but this is not what I publish. And so I sent him to a couple of resources. There's a book called The Guide to Getting an Agent, this type of thing. And do your research is what I'm trying to say. And figure out who represents the kind of thing that you want to write and pitch them. But I will say it's incredibly hard to get an agent. And that's just like any other artistic field. There's a barrier for entry. So that is the thing that authors tell me the most when I go to writers' conferences. Is like everybody says, get an agent, but it's so hard to get an agent. They're not wrong. And there are other ways to be seen. There are other ways to be considered. But that is the most acceptable lane.
And what would you say about the reality of being, like, say you got the agent, wow, you made it there that far, and then say your agent finds a home for your book and it comes out now. What is the expectation versus the reality for like a first time published author of,
after publishing?
If there's a typical experience, what might that look like?
So I have a little talk that I like to give at writers' conferences, and I've named it many things over the years. Let's call it How to Be a Popular Author. But it's a trick because when they come in, I say, if you are looking to make money as an author, you need to find a different career immediately. Because only the top 1% of the 1% make a living wage writing books. Not everybody's James Patterson or Kristen Hanna or whoever you've heard of, right? It's these are the tippy top. Some authors make enough to quit their day job, and that's actually a pretty high bar. But you have to do it because you love the craft of it and you have something to say. That's what I think. So the expectation should be, I had something that I felt was important enough to say, and my agent and my publisher felt it was important enough to get it out there in the world, and your expectation should be that happened. But sometimes authors get paid a lot of money as far as an advance, or they get a lot of publicity and a lot of acclaim out the gate, but those are very, very rare. Those are almost lottery type situations.
Yeah.
There are thousands of other authors who are publishing more quietly behind the scenes if you're not the book of the season. So if you think about a publisher across publishing, let's say every season 500,000 books are going to publish, including academic.
That's a gobsmacking number.
It is.
That's crazy.
So if you take into account self-publishing, academic publishing, all these things, let's say 500,000 books 3 times a year, and you've heard of 4 of those books, that kind of gives you a sense of the odds. So I don't believe in luck per se, but I do think that the window to be like somebody who makes millions as an author is pretty... It's a very small,
infinitesimally small. Yes. And so within your, I keep wanting to say label.
Yeah.
With your publishing house.
Actually, it's a good comparison.
I would think
it's
that's
like a label, and I'm like a record producer.
And so to take that analogy, when I think of like the record industry of the 90s and aughts before everything crash landed, there was kind of a policy, rumored or not, where labels would just release a ton of stuff just hoping something's stuck to the wall. And that's what's going on now. Yeah,
for sure. And then everybody makes a cash play. One of the most venerable literary publishers is Knopf, and people don't know, but they published 50 Shades of Grey. It was a Wattpad story, and then it became a really popular self-published book.
What's a Wattpad story?
Oh, it's just like a free platform for story writing.
Okay.
And mostly smut. I have to say. Well, I shouldn't say mostly.
Platform meaning it's just like what you can
like
find on Amazon.
It's like a Substack.
Okay.
Type of thing.
I see.
And it became really popular, I don't know, 15 years ago. And Knopf saw it and saw how huge it was becoming and decided this would be a really good cash play for them, even though it was nothing like what they had published and not near the caliber of writing or kind of project that they normally publish.
But it sold
millions and millions and millions of copies. So funny side note about a book like 50 Shades of Grey, it was the advent of the e-reader that made that book so phenomenally popular because people can't see what you're reading. Right? You can be sitting on the train commuting to work and reading this like really sexy book.
It doesn't say 50 Shades of Grey with the hot
and no one knows.
Girl.
And I remember way back in the day, my rep, when I was a book buyer at a bookstore, he kept pushing this book, Dan Brown, Da Vinci Code. And I was like, it sounds all right. And Dan Brown's former works had sold okay. And I remember the moment when I got on a plane and every single person on that plane was holding that book. And I was like, whoa, okay. But you can't do that anymore because people read on their phone, they read on the Kindle or their e-reader. So that's what made that book so crazy popular, is the secrecy of it.
Oh, the secrecy of it. And then prior to the e-reader, the paperback, like a book like Da Vinci Code, advertised itself, right? Like that was a huge part of it. People would see somebody reading that book and they'd be like, what is that? And then they'd go get it. So that's kind of...
I once took a book when I was working in a different arena in marketing and publicity. I had a little firm that did that for books. And I did influencer campaigns. This is before social media. But I went to different bars around town and I took the book with me. And I would just sit it on the stool or the table or the bar next to me. It was called the 3 Martini Playdate. And so many people would approach me and ask me about that book.
Just because of the title?
Yep.
Nice.
It had really cute cover,
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't remember why I even talked about that. But
well, it's like guerrilla marketing kind of thing. Well, you were talking about it because it's funny because it reminds me, one of my favorite things to do, and I just, this is the poster for people just listening, that the handbill version of the poster that I made for this live show that we're doing in a couple of weeks for the podcast.
Okay.
And 2 things about that is that this is a holdover from my earlier iteration as a, aughts something singer-songwriter, where every show I would have, I'd make a poster for it and I'd put it up all over town. And I loved that. The paper of it.
We once did a flyer in my band in San Francisco, and at the bottom of the flyer we wrote "Free Biscuits." And because we wanted people to show out, come out.
Yeah.
It turned out to be a lot of unhoused people came for the free biscuits, but that was okay too because they really enjoyed the music. But no, I was a stapler on the phone pole gal for sure.
For sure. And so my point also was that everywhere I've gone for the last month and a half since I've had these, any transaction I have, one just kind of gets set there on the counter between the kids, just because for that little, I love the randomness of that idea. Yeah. The world needs as much random as possible, especially now.
When I go in a bookstore, you don't think I go and face out every single one of my books? Sure I do.
Hell yeah.
Like spine out? I don't think so. Let's look at the cover.
That's great. Okay. Maybe this is okay. There's a couple other things I want to talk about this from the publishing side.
Is the big overarching question, how do you make it? Like, what's the path to making it?
No, I wanted to sort of unpack a little bit of what the industry, I was going to say mainstream publishing industry, it looks like right now. And then I was going to say, okay, barring the bar to entry is high.
Yes.
The outcome is uncertain at best, even if you get in. Okay. Yes. So, what is there to be said for self-publishing, and why not?
I think the tough thing about self-publishing is that there are so many millions of books out there that have been self-published. So creating visibility for the book you've published can be expensive or hard or impossible. And so I feel like I'm saying a lot of like really negative things about it, but it's mostly if you are compelled to create and you have something to say, of course you should publish. And if you cannot make the barrier for entry of getting an agent and getting a traditional publisher, of course you should self-publish. But your expectation of how many copies you will sell should be low.
Adjusted accordingly.
Yeah. I mean, it's really hard. We are just inundated with media. And it's very hard to pierce through all that noise. I
mean, just with the publishing, not only within the publishing industry are titles competing with titles, but the whole industry is competing with the video game industry. And everyone's fighting for attention. And it's at a premium now more than ever. I love what you said in there about if you have something to say and you feel you must, then do it.
And that's the only reason to do it in my mind. A lot of people see it as an opportunity, a revenue opportunity. And I'm not saying it can't be done, but I talk to authors every day that were in the gold rush years of self-publishing, where there weren't a lot of books out there in that arena. And there wasn't a lot of cost involved in getting attention for those books. And their sales have waned because the selection gets ever bigger. But the reader set is only growing in very small incremental amounts, because not only is it waiting for people to come to the idea of being a reader or a voracious reader who consumes a lot of books, but you're also competing with all of those other content streams, right? You've got streaming and video games and VR and I don't know, name anything. Music.
Yeah, it's a crowded jungle out there. One other thing too is, can you say something about the power or the waning power of blurbs in the current climate? Because it used to be such, does it matter that Stephen King says something nice about your book?
Well, that does.
Yeah,
and
maybe,
actually, let me define blurb for those
okay.
who don't know what that means. It means an endorsement for your book from another author, usually. One of the strangest endorsements I have is from Tony Robbins, the coach, life coach, I guess you'd call him, because the author happens to be sort of in his inner circle and kind of found his way to success through this Tony Robbins coaching methodology. But speaking generally, blurbs don't matter at all.
Yeah.
Unless it's someone you've heard of. So the Stephen King blurb would matter, because what that would say to a reader is, gosh, I love Stephen King, or he's important and famous author. What he says matters. But if it's just like another author or an author that doesn't write in the same arena that you do, it doesn't matter.
It's just a name.
It's just a name.
But what about...
It's just words. It's just word salad at that point.
What about other publications like newspaper reviews or...
Yeah, if only they still did that. There's like 2 newspapers in the country that still write long form book reviews. The rest have stopped.
What are they?
LA Times and New York Times. San Francisco Chronicle, they don't. I'll never forget talking to this agent back in the day. And she was like, I know people. Get me the San Francisco Chronicle. And I was like, yeah, get them. Ask them why they're not writing about books anymore. I mean, they do have a book section, but it's so much different than it used to be. It's like a thumbnail and maybe 2 or 3 lines. No one's writing critical reviews. There are some New York Review of Books, for example, is dedicated wholly just to that. But I'm talking about mainstream newspapers. They don't write about it anymore. And it's really hard to get featured in magazines because there isn't a lot of territory.
Let's, on that happy note.
Yeah, it's all on TikTok. Get on TikTok.
I mean, really, that's kind of how good you are at social media and all of these things.
It's absolutely driving a lot of selection right now.
Yeah.
I would say curation is mostly driven now, not by book reviews, but by celebrity influencers and social media.
Mm-hmm. You hear that, Kyle? You need to start posting more. Okay, well, this isn't what you started out doing.
No.
And I don't even think it's going to be what you end up doing.
No.
I think it's been a long and prosperous chapter. But
Yes.
let's talk about what brought you into this.
Yes.
And maybe we can even say like, you're essentially a creative person, and maybe talk about that journey
Yes.
in a sense. You started out as an
Right.
actor.
I did.
You were very young.
I was.
And then
So my mother was in the theater. She was a choreographer, for a theater here in Nashville, Circle Theater, underneath the Bluebird Cafe, if you can believe that. And so I was just...
where the Bluebird is right now?
Absolutely.
Like there's a basement in the
There was a theater
Bluebird?
under there. Mm-hmm.
Wow. It's like the in Pee-wee's Big Adventure, or the basement of the Alamo, the basement of the
I
Bluebird.
saw so many scandalous things as a child, like I'm not sure if I was supposed to see that, but, I would be sitting in the seats doing my 3rd grade homework or whatever and waiting for her. And I was a real hammy kid. I'm sure that's shocking to hear. And so I sort of got involved at that point, but I would say I never really took it seriously enough to do the PowerPoint that Emma Stone did that said, let's move the family to LA because I want to be an actor. I don't know if you've heard that story, but it's pretty legendary.
Her family moved so that she could have a shot? Is that
Yes,
the punchline of this? Okay.
Absolutely.
Cool.
I think from Phoenix, Arizona, which is so wild. I was more of a person who wanted to tell a story always and had something to say. And in some respects, in my younger years, wanted attention. That was a big part of it. That's evolved over the course of my life a lot. But I wanted people to clap and say, oh, you're great. You wanted that attention. But I did voice lessons and dance lessons and acting lessons and all the things. So then when I went to college and went to Belmont, it's like, oh, I'll be a music major, because they didn't really have a really strong theater department at that time. So always the motivation was I had something to say. So when I wrote songs, it was like I was trying to say something. I wanted to be heard. And I wanted to say stuff, and I didn't even really know what that stuff was. So it kind of evolved from that place of just really wanting to say, hey, everybody stop for a moment and listen to me because I have something to say. And it's really always been that. It's either me trying to say the thing or help another person say the thing or get that thing out in the world so that people will hear or see it, because it might move you or change your perspective or help you understand someone better. It's always been the motivation.
There's a quote that I've come across somewhere along my journey from Leonard Bernstein. He talks about the artist's life being at its essence really nothing more than this. I'm going to kind of mangle this pretty good, but nothing more than what animates a crying baby. It's just like, because we're all just like clamoring for attention. It's the same thing. If babies cry, Picasso painting, it's just wanting attention. I mean, I think that's a little cynical from the old master himself to say that.
Did you know?
There's something to it.
Side note, trivia, that Bernstein left this incredible endowment to public schools in America. And certain public schools were designated as Bernstein schools.
I didn't know that.
My daughter went to one of these middle schools in Portland, Oregon, and everything that they learn is filtered through the lens of music and art.
Wow.
And it was incredible.
Are they still alive and well?
Yeah.
The schools?
Yeah.
Well, that's a whole other thing. We'll talk about that after. Off mic.
I haven't seen the movie yet either, so maybe let's have a part 2 about Bernstein and all.
So you wanted to say something.
Yes, for sure.
You wanted to develop your tools of saying it. You wanted to be part of the saying of things, maybe is a fair way of saying it.
And being around other people who had stuff to say. I just remember that feeling of being around creative people and what that felt like. And how that spurred my own thought process. I always wanted to be in that arena, always. And I kind of always have been, which is amazing to look back on that and say that now.
Yeah, I'm thinking about this too, of like what animates me. When we have conversations, I'm always like, well, how does this touch me? How do I relate to that? And my own feeling about what's driven me has evolved as well. And one thing that's ebbed is a little bit of this, like, I have to be a star. I was just like, I want to be. That
happened to me too.
At Bonnaroo. But what has not ebbed and has gotten even more so is I've always loved talent and I wanted to be around it, and I wanted to develop my own talent. But as soon as I saw somebody, it's still to this day, anytime I see somebody wonderful at something, I just want to be near them. I want to be around them. I want to help them if I can. That's part of what this thing is about. And so I can really relate to that.
Yeah.
Just being in a community of talented people.
I remember every segment of Sentiment, how I felt about this interaction with creativity and with creative people, like in every single phase of my life. So in the very earliest iteration, it was like, look at me, like me, applaud, da-da-da. Then it was more like, I have something to say, and I feel like you might want to hear what I have to say. And so I felt like really strongly about that. And then it became more about like, the world is super fucked up. And these are messages that we all need to hear. Like it became like a mission almost. And now it's more like, I guess I would call it something more like an energy or a feeling that I always feel that we are starved of empathy in the world. And I think that seeing a film or a play or listening to music or reading a book, it taps into this thing that we are starved of now. So it's evolved over time. But I remember the moment where I didn't care if people liked what I did. I remember that moment exactly. I was in a little theater company in San Francisco. We were producing a play and I was like, I just don't care. Like the message is there and people will come to it with their own energy and thoughts. And I'm not in charge of that. It's separate from me. And I've done this work and now I'm out of the equation. And it was so freeing because before that I was just like, what are the reviews? What do people think? And at that moment I was just like, this is important.
Would that we all could have such a distinctive moment.
I've had so many of those. I remember the moment where I realized I think I could be in the book business. It was an exact moment. Like it's like a little scene in a movie.
I think you told me about it when we first met. So but maybe you could share that story.
Well, I'd had a child and I was living in San Francisco and I was making money doing various odd jobs and things. I had never had a full-time job in my entire life. I worked in coffee shops, I worked in bookstores, I worked in record stores. I was one of those gals. And I had this baby and I started thinking like, she's going to ask me for stuff. Like, I want to take ballet lessons or something. And I just began to worry that I needed to get a job. But I hate business and I hate business people. And so I just didn't know what I could do. I really didn't. But I was standing in the bookstore that I worked in, this tiny little store in San Francisco, and I was holding this book in my hand. And I was like, this is the thing that people do for a living. They make these books. And I have no idea how they do that. But I'm going to figure it out. And that's what I did. And so I went back to school when I was 40 and to study something practical. By this time, we had moved to Portland. And I went back to school to study marketing. But I'm so horribly incorrigible that I signed up for a couple of classes just for the credits. And it was, they were, back then we called it women's studies. It was gender studies class. And my eyes were so opened by this class. I couldn't believe it. I just had no idea what that was until I went to that class. And it changed me so much that I ended up getting a degree in gender studies instead of marketing. So, I just can't help myself. Liberal arts forever.
Yeah, I was just going to say, led by your own burning curiosity.
But I did study marketing, and I did get a certificate in publishing, and I did get a job in publishing while working at a bookstore in Portland, Oregon.
How do you square marketing with like that weird, unquenchable thirst for? I don't know, following your heart would be a clumsy way of putting it.
I always say art and commerce make really terrible bedfellows. I mean, they just collide. It's sort of the yin and yang of all of it. And the business of making books is a business. And it turned out I was pretty good at it. I still keep the businessy posturing piece of it at arm's length as much as possible. And I get dinged for that sometimes. My sort of jazz hand style in a meeting where I don't have the sort of businessy posture. But the way I have squared that in my mind is, if a tree falls in the woods, does anybody hear it? So as much as I like to temper people's expectations, I do think that important books should be read by lots of people. And then the way to get that in the hands of readers is marketing and that type of business endeavor. But I think that's what you're asking.
It is. And I think that maybe, is it fair to say in your position, you have the luxury of choosing which books are deserving of those resources.
Yes.
So that's a huge part. You're not having to sell something that you don't believe in necessarily.
Yeah, and that's hard because I will say I have signed many books over the years or worked with many books over the years where the pitch and the promise of the book didn't end up on the page. So I always, and this sounds terrible, but I'm still going to say it because it's the truth. All I have is 3 chords in the truth, Korby. So that's what I'm going to say. They're like horses, and they all go in the starting gate, and then the bell rings, and the doors fly open, and the horses start to run, and some of the horses start to pull away, and some of them fall back, some of them even like fall down and break their leg, but at some point, every single one of those horses was cared for and fed and trained, and all these things
given every chance.
Exactly, and so. Books begin to pull away from the pack based on how they develop over the course of the time that you have your hands on them, and then the packaging and all of this, and you begin to see which are the books that have the best chance to win the race. But that's hard. I never just go, oh, well, just get off the track. So
what that means practically is some of that pulling away happening in-house before the things are even published?
Oh, yes.
We'll talk about that. I'm just curious. This is like a peek behind the velvet curtain.
It truly is like that. I mean, sometimes you buy a book on proposal, or say you sign an author for 2 books, and you have the first book in hand, and it's wonderful, and you do all the things, and then they deliver the second, and it's like, this didn't show up like I thought it would, and then you try to develop it, but it doesn't really get there. I don't know. So
that's a 2-book deal.
Yeah.
But what about within the 1 book vis-a-vis the other books in-house that are all? How do you know which ones? Well, here's
a perfect example. We signed a book called The Bright Side of Going Dark, and it was a women's fiction kind of cute book about this woman giving up social media, and it published in, I want to say, February of 2020. And so then when the pandemic hit and everything went to virtual, like the topic ended up stomping on the success of that book. Or another book we signed called The Lending Library, same year, it was supposed to be this really cool little book for libraries, but there were no libraries for 2 years. So sometimes it's the marketplace conditions that have that happen. Sometimes it's the way the book comes together. Sometimes, let's say you're making a film, and every single piece has to click together. All the planets have to line up, and everything has to be this magic fairy dust goes all over everything, and it turns out great. But sometimes there's some element that just doesn't work exactly right. So it's sort of like the cylinders of making the book. As you go through, something goes awry, and it just doesn't turn out exactly like it doesn't have that same magic quality you thought it would have in the end.
Yeah, I mean, with the history of the world is fraught with stories of lucky chances and unlucky misses, and it's it sounds like even within a publishing company can control some elements of the market or opportunities, but they can't predict a pandemic.
Yeah, and I also think sometimes it's just how the words affect the readers or don't. So I remember signing this book from this guy, super best-selling mystery thriller author who wanted to expand his audience and publish under a pen name very secretly to try out something new. And I just loved the book. I thought it was fantastic. I put every single bit of resource we had behind it. I love the package. I love the book. It's the biggest flop of my career. Nobody liked it.
Wow.
Readers were just kind of very blasé about it.
And so do you, I'm sure you take that a little personally.
I do, but less than I used to. Mm-hmm. Because again, that's the relationship between the words and the reader. It's just none of my business. That's right.
Yeah. It's sacred space.
That's right.
In a way.
And I just put it out there and hope for the best.
Yeah. I mean, so much of what you're saying is like, it's like painful for me to hear this. And also I just recognize it all. I mean,
being so negative, but it
is like to be called to a life of creativity is to be called to a life of disappointment in some large sense.
That's kind of what I want to talk about.
Okay. That's why I'm bringing it up.
Yeah. I really want to talk about the thing that compels you to pursue a life that isn't smoothly paved. Mm-hmm. You know, I remember when I was young and everybody said, "What's your backup plan?" And I was like, "I'll see you on the Grammys, whatever." You know,
totally.
This is going to make a great story for Rolling Stone. Yeah. Honest to goodness, what compels you to do that? I think it's because it's almost like a dog whistle, and like you're the person that can hear it, or this bell that rings, and it's a siren call. At any moment in time, I could have said, you know what? I'm going to be an XYZ. And that thing could be anything. Because it's smooth, or it has a pension, or, or whatever.
It makes sense.
And it makes sense. But I've just always gone on this path. I'm just pulled in that direction. And I remember this fellow I was with for a long time in San Francisco. I remember the revelation I had years after we broke it off. I was like, you know what? I didn't want to be with him. I wanted to be him. He was so creative. Everything he did was just wildly creative. Everything. He just had this way of approaching everything with this eye and this curiosity. And I've always been drawn to storytelling, to the people who are moved by those stories and the people who create them. Always. And I think there's a lot of things that keep you from doing it. And that's one of the things I was texting with you about. I think one of those things is the expectation that people have of how that shows up. I think in modern times, we've associated artistic creativity with celebrity and with success, with beauty, with luxury. And I think it's a fallacy. I think shame is a big part of what keeps people from being creative.
And talk about that.
Everyday life. Yeah. It's not good enough. No one will like it. I'm not good enough. I don't look the right way. I don't act the right way. I don't know the right people.
I mean, I feel like this all the time, every day.
Right.
It's so uncomfortable to hear it.
It is the thing that clobbers creativity. And I'm talking about, you can go to your, what did she call it? I can't remember the name of it. It was something cute and clever, but it's somewhere where you go and drink wine and you paint ceramics. I mean, I'm talking about something as simple as that. If you're a person who doesn't have a creative avenue and that feels fun to you, you might create this mug and then you're like, oh, my mug is terrible. No, throw it away, or I'm not even going to pick it up, because you think it's supposed to be this perfect, gorgeous, beautiful thing that everyone's going to admire, instead of the act of doing it itself, all the way up to the height, which is, writing a song, composing a lyric, writing a book, painting something beautiful, raising the ceiling in your office, into creating the vision of the space that you want. And I think that shame is systemic in our society. I think we all carry a lot of shame from different aspects, but the shame is built because the way we see creativity is now really celebrity or beauty or riches or Lamborghinis. It's changed over time. And the worship of that.
The accoutrements of the thing rather than the thing itself.
It's fine to want to make a living doing what you love. But what's not fine is that you feel like if you are not going to be, Beyonce and Jay-Z, that you can't create anything.
Then what's the point?
What's the point?
God, I can, I think that two thoughts occur to me. One is that great Ralph Waldo Emerson quote that about all life being an experiment, therefore don't be too precious with it. This helped me a lot in my foray into the unknown. And I think that a huge part of this podcast and what I am trying to cultivate in this chapter in my life is a spirit, a permissive atmosphere, and one that makes people want to have a relationship to creativity. And I had a really formative experience when I was in college, when I was figuring it out, and I had some aptitude for music and definitely the ambition for it. But I just didn't really gel with the kids at the club and their white belts, and they're just striking the poses.
White belts. Say more about that.
That was just what stands out. Still to this day, I'm always like, white belts.
There's a lyric in that.
Takes a lot of balls. But I went to this Bluegrass festival in Tacoma, and it was Tacoma, Washington, of all places, called Wintergrass. It's absolutely alive and well today. At that time, it was in a Sheraton hotel, and I had kind of like an interest in bluegrass music because it's awesome. Because it's awesome, but I didn't know, nobody was playing bluegrass up there, and this is the corner of America in Bellingham, Washington, where now people are, which is wonderful, but not then. But I had come across a guy named Doc Watson, and the music just blew me away. I didn't grow up in any of this music. I kind of stumbled upon it, and through that, I was like, there's this thing called bluegrass banjo. Okay, I recognize that. Anyway, I went to this place. I just wanted to see it live, and I drove down from Bellingham in my VW bus, and I parked on the street, and I walked into the front door of the building. It makes me emotional to think about it, but it was just like this place that was just taken over by just people. And there's like grandpas playing with little kids, and I just was like, this was what I wanted to be around.
Yes,
because it was just music for its sake. It was just like, nobody was on stage. There were shows and there was stages. That was part of the thing, but most of it was about getting together and playing music as humans. Yeah. And that has animated me ever since, really. I mean, like, I've been fortunate to have a career and had records, and I played shows, and I love doing all of that, but there's nothing like getting together and just be like playing music for its own sake. Yeah. And
I used to go to Kerrville every year.
Oh God!
And it was that exactly.
I fucking love Kerrville. Yeah. Staying up till 4:00 in the morning, sitting in a circle, listening to an old guy play song, or this young girl who's just wrote her first song ever in her life.
Yeah,
and
just like, sitting by the fire.
Just sitting by the fire.
Fantastic.
It's so important when you talk about empathy and art's role in instilling that in this starving culture that we find ourselves in. Yeah. I'm on that team, and
I just saw Sierra Farrell for the first time.
Oh my God!
And she was playing at the Ryman, and I went down there by myself. Went to see the show.
Yeah.
And I was as entranced by who was there as I was by how fantastic she was, because it's such a mash of styles. I was very fascinated by it, but it was just every kind of human in this. Auditorium. It was amazing.
Teachers, hippies,
everything.
Yeah,
a bunch of bros
punk rockers,
together.
Bros. Yeah, totally.
This really cute guy next to me is like, "Is this your first time to see Sierra?" I'm like, "Yes." He's like, "Oh, you're gonna love it." It was just all of these people there just to kind of feel the fantastic energy that was going to come off of this wildly creative person, and I mean, with something to say. I just loved it. And I've always loved that. And I can remember scribbling down songs while being at other people's shows, because it's almost like you're in this sort of waterfall of this creative like flow and energy. And then I would be hearing like really alternate melodies and lyrics in my head, and I would just scribble it on the cocktail napkin.
Yeah, can relate.
And I've seen so many shows at the Bluebird, like back in the day when it was really like a chicken salad place, but they also had music, and just going, that person is going to be so mega successful because I can hear this sonic boom behind them because of how distilled their message was. It's just, I've had so many magical moments like that. And I do think music is one of the great unifiers and the great empathy tapper inner tours that has ever existed. So that sense that you had at that festival of everybody there and it not being anything but just this pure sense of joy amongst all of these variety of people, we just don't have that in the world that much.
Yeah. I mean, bluegrass people would beg to differ and say, like, yeah, that's why we do it, you know?
Yeah.
and the folk people, too.
I mean, look at the Gulch in Nashville. You know,
Hilarious.
I grew up with the Station Inn being like this little hut in the middle of this giant gravel parking lot, or just gravel lot.
Yeah.
And now there's like all this new Nashville like built up all around it. And then you just walk in and it's like this portal to another world.
Truly.
It's like, here's your popcorn, and we don't have cocktails.
Yeah.
So whatever.
Yeah. Or maybe they do have microbrews now.
I think they do now.
But yeah.
But like, I
that was a
remember
grudging
my
concession.
sister asking like, what kind of wine you have. And they were just like...
Red or white.
Exactly. Like, consider this your, second cousin twice removes cheap wedding with tall boys. And anyway,
yeah,
it's just another world. The music is so pure there. It's so incredibly pure there.
Totally. And you also can't buy, there's not seating in advance. If you want to go to the show, you wait in line.
Yep.
Like a normal person.
Give them your $10 or $20 or whatever. I mean, it's just a slice of something that hardly exists anymore.
Totally. And so, yeah, to just bring it back to what my original rant was, that just like, I feel that people need to have a relationship to creativity that exists unto themselves. And I think this idea in society, to your point about treating it as something that for experts, for America's Got Talent contest winners or something. It's something you watch on TV.
Ring. It's a brass ring.
Yeah, it's like what song could you maybe write yourself, or even just like learning somebody else's song.
Right.
That's a 3-chord song and playing it yourself just for your own joy. It's like, I want people to feel empowered to do that.
I remember one of the greatest guitar players I've ever known, and I mean, Lord knows if he were to see or hear this, it's Ken McMahon, and he's a local guy, and he's just incredible. And his band used to do me the great pleasure of backing me up back in the day, the Dusters, they were called. And he was the one that helped me understand that a guitar was just a piano sideways. Like, it all made sense to me at that point. And the very first song I learned on the guitar was Blackbird by the Beatles.
Oh,
and that slide, I felt so cool, learning how to do that.
To the high string, yeah.
Yes. And I remember saying, this is so much more portable than the piano. I can take this with me wherever I go. And I mean, it's just, I don't know. It just, those moments, like all by myself, just learning something and feeling something, and I don't know. It just, to me, it's better than the biggest stadium arena show, which I've also been to and really enjoyed as well. But it's just a personal relationship with creativity that I think that we have lost a sense of outside of the arena of the people that you and I deal with and talk to all the time. There's just this huge swath of the country where the arts have been stripped out of schools, and it has been reduced to a brass ring or a celebrity, win the lottery type of thing. And I just think we should all be encouraged to not only embrace everyone's senses of creativity and how they express themselves, but also do it ourselves and not worry about the outcome, not worry about whether it's good or not, because good is not even a thing.
Yeah.
It's totally subjective.
One of my dreams for when I'm wealthy and famous and can do anything I want is to bring music back into the schools, like start a foundation. I've toyed with this a little bit. It's like, what if I could just get somebody else who is famous and well-funded to help me do this, but to like have instruments available in schools again. And it's all motivated by this photograph that I came across. There's this book that I have lost. It's the one thing that I think about that causes me pain to this day, which is a book I found at a used bookstore in my 20s called The Power of Music, and it was maybe from 1950 or something. It was just this like almost handmade book. It was published by Menk Music, ENC. It's still a thing today. It's like Music Educators of America, and all it is was pictures of people playing music, all of its iterations. And the front picture is like, the very first picture is, it must have been at a rehearsal or something. It's the conductor, it's his face, and the camera's like this and looking up at him, and he's just like, he's just like willing as much music out of the orchestra as possible. That's the first picture. And then you turn it over and it's a picture of like this very overweight guy, and it's maybe in like Hungary or some Eastern Bloc country, and he's wearing a clown suit and he's got a huge kick drum and a beater. And that's the other picture. And I'm just like
Both of those. Fuck yes. And all of the pictures to follow were just like little people playing. Anyway, there's one photo in there of this older educator. He's a high school student. Maybe he's an orchestra teacher or something. And he's surrounded by kids and he's holding the violin. And he's just like pointing to the parts and the kids are around it. And I'm just like, that is so incredibly precious to just like the physical proximity to an instrument, a real instrument, and having kids to like be able to touch it and like recognize that that's a thing that I too could do. I mean, that is such a powerful, cathartic moment for a child to feel like I could do that. It's not like that's what's happening in the phones. It's so much garbage in or TV before that. You just like saw the people do it and they were so beautiful and who am I?
Yeah,
no,
exactly.
Like so anyway, if I could just bring a whole bunch of instruments into the schools and pay some people to start teaching, and just to fit really my vision stops at get the physical instruments to the schools and like let kids be around them. That would be a start.
Well, first of all, we need to talk more about the Bernstein method that I was telling you about and that endowment, because maybe you pick up the mantle where that leaves off, because that's exactly what he was trying to do, is bring it back to education and have people learn through that lens of that flow. And secondarily, what I want to bring back to the schools is square dancing in gym class.
Yeah. I love square dancing. Because
that was just like, wow. I mean, I'll never forget that as long as I live.
When I knew it was Contra Dancing, and that's a version of that. Yeah. And I also, we can riff on that for just a second. You don't have to go too far. But I didn't discover that until Bellingham days. Yeah. And but what I loved, and I wasn't a guy who danced. I came from a no dancing denomination. And also am a dude and not super comfortable, whatever. But the idea of like a social dance where the moves were taught and you just had to do what you were told was a nice entrance into that terrifying world. Right. But yeah, like one of the things I loved about Contra Dancing was that, you came with your partner, y'all learned the dance, and then the fiddle started up and you just did it. And you just did and usually they were mixers. And so you would have your person that you started with, and then when you'd end up with the next partner, and then you dance with him. And the only rule was that when you spun each other, you had to look each other in the eye. Yeah. And that was like, whoa, it's kind of a sexy moment.
And there were like hands touching because you'd had to like link arms and stuff. Yeah. I just remember thinking that there would never be a more awkward time in my entire life, and kind of reveling in that. Just sort of like, if you can fly up above yourself for a minute and just disassociate and go, whoa. There's nothing better than that.
Pure innocence.
I would love to go back to that day and just look at it again and laugh. It's just so funny.
Yeah. I mean, part of what that spirit was, what provided for that opportunity was like an absence of this constant drive for, I don't know, what would you call it, like verifiable success, or like test taking and all of that stuff. And then with it, as adults, just like this constant pressure to make as much money as possible, which I feel, and I've like eluded it, trust me, better than almost anybody. Right. But just you still, like around the normal people in the world, they don't have this sense of permission to do something that doesn't generate income, whether it be reading a book of fiction or like all of this stuff that's killing it on social media is just like how to be the maximum version of yourself, how to do a pull-up, how to do 50 pull-ups, how to do whatever, how to turn your income into $85K in your first 3 months, whatever that is. And it's just like, God,
it's a very American thing.
It's very,
where everything has to be maximalized and, optimized and
streamlined.
It's a very American thing. People just don't know how to just chillax, and just let things unfold. And that was definitely something I had to learn, especially early when I went into quote unquote having a career in the book business. I was very much 6 months in and saying, why am I not president of this place? Everyone here is stupid except for me. I just I could not see myself in that space. And it took me a very long time to learn how to just be patient and put my head down and do the work and let the work speak for itself. And so my mantra at work is always like, you may not like me, but you will respect me because of the work that I do. And that's always been the case because I have, my strange ways of doing things. But there's a sense of patience and passion in that illuminates so many other things in my life now, that it is me consciously tapping out of this. It has to be the max. It has to be 30% more. It's got to be this. It's got to be that. You've got to be rich. You've got to be this. And da da da. It's me consciously unplugging from that and just doing the work, and that can be really hard sometimes. Really hard. And I have moments. I don't want to make it seem like I'm this really Zen person and I don't think about it ever. I've had moments of, like, for example, taking my author out to lunch, and then we go out to our cars and they get in their, shiny new Tesla and I get in my Kia Soul, and I'm like, something's wrong here. I'm like working 14 hours a day, and what the heck, wanting more out of what I'm doing, wanting more input for my output. But at the end of the day, I'm really consciously trying to tap into this place of just flow, just letting things flow. And I feel like everything in the media and our phones is the counter. Yeah, exactly. It's the exact opposite of that. It's hurry, faster, more, better. And then this constant worship of celebrity and culture, the celebrity culture.
What's next for you?
I don't know, but I'm about to step off a cliff in a really big way. So I have some ideas of it, but that art and commerce thing that I was talking about earlier, where it's like uncomfortable bedfellows. I think I've gone as far in the commerce lane, especially at a company like Amazon, that I think I can. So I'm planning my next chapter, because over the years that I have been there, and as I've risen up, quote unquote, my hands are less and less on the clay. And I want to get back to that. So I'm not exactly sure how that's going to manifest itself, but this is I how people talk about midlife. I'm in the last third of my life. I think of it as 3 pieces for reasons that we'd have to do a whole other podcast about. And would likely be much, much less interesting. But this last third, it's like, these are the days that really need to count. And I need to be doing something with all of my days that excites me and intrigues me as much as that day that I was holding that book and saying, this is a thing. And I want to learn how to do that thing. So I'm back in that curious mind right now. And I just want to find joy and not necessarily always be on a journey of like something that's over there. I just want to have it right here, right now, all the time. Did that even make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
You're just like drawing time closer to you, to the immediate moment.
Totally. Because, you often get on this thing. It's like there's a goal, and that's not a bad thing, but you're pursuing something that has an end and a result. And I'm just trying to eliminate that. I'm trying to say the end is here. The result is right here. The moment is right here. I don't need to go over there to get it. I can have it right now. So that's kind of
I like it.
An airy way to say
spiritual,
it.
Spiritual direction. But no, we're not going to bind you to any concrete particulars just yet. Yeah. And I can see it, but more than that, I can feel what it feels like. And I've done all the things that I set out to do, literally all of the things, most especially raise my daughter. She's a grown woman now. She has her own life. And a lot of what I did in terms of building a quote unquote career, and I always put quotations around it because I've been so kooky through the whole thing, was for her. And now she's raised up and I've done my best. And now I'm thinking about how to feel joy and feel that flow all the time in the moment right now. It's your turn.
Yeah, it's always been my turn.
Yeah.
I remember my friends that we had the theater company together. I had moved to Portland at this point, and we had this together in San Francisco. And so I moved to Portland, and lo and behold, they moved to Portland. They were a married couple. We were like a trio. And so they moved to Portland, and they said, hey, let's do it again. Let's do it here. This is a great place. This city is like ripe for something new. And I said, no, I'm not going to act for a while. And I'm not going to do that for a while. I'm being a mom right now, and I'm doing this other thing, and I'm trying to learn this thing, like go into publishing. And they were so stunned. They were just like, oh, like shock and awe does not even begin to describe. And then I said, I will go back to that when I feel compelled to tell stories in that way. And I will be a better actor, producer, whatever, because of the life I've lived in between. But right now I'm choosing not to do it. And it was the easiest thing in the world. It wasn't even like, I'm giving this up. It was more like, I'm choosing to do this right now.
That speaks to something inside of you that was able to honor the ineffable core. That's a clumsy way of putting it, but like so many people cling to this idea of, especially if they put a lot of time into a particular journey, like, this is what I am. What am I without that? So that's impressive.
Well, that's the hard thing about making a change, because who am I if I'm not this person in publishing with this title? Because I've been this for a long time now. And that's what I'm trying to put my finger on. And I don't know if it needs a label, but I definitely know that it will continue the journey I have been on, which I call either creating stories or making stories heard.
It feels very alive from where I sit.
Good.
You know, I'm not going to worry about you too much, like you're in a rut now. You're like, I don't think
there's nothing
here
to worry about. I feel good about it. And it is the stepping off a cliff, though, for sure.
Yeah.
It's like, wow, free fall. Woo. So in some ways that's exhilarating, but in other ways there could be a big splat. You don't know?
Yeah, tell me about it. Well, I'm excited to see what shapes up. I think that we're going to, I think we're going to continue to be friends, if fingers crossed.
I hope so.
And in the meantime, thank you so much for sharing your heart and your expertise with us.
Thank you for having me.
It's been really fun. Hey, thanks for watching. Go ahead and click here to like and subscribe. You can click right there to watch another video, or click here to watch a playlist featuring the songs of the Morse Code Podcast. Okay, thank you very much.